Okay, today we're going to do this lovely picture of Barafundle Bay, which is near Stackpole or Bosherston. You might know it, in Pembrokeshire. Beautiful spot, voted best beach UK several times. So if you've not visited, go and have a look. You can walk from National Trust car park over here, Broadhaven South, or the Stackpole car park, which is down this way. But it's quite a spot, but you need to walk to it. It's about 10-20 minutes walk or something like that, so but it's worth it once you get there. We're going to do it in watercolour pencil, which I've got some of here. I've only got a few watercolour pencils on me at the moment. The rest are locked up in Carmarthen. So I'm going to just work with this, what I've got basically, which is what a lot of us have to do because we don't have huge sets of everything. So, you know, you can always make a painting with whatever colours you've got. Watercolour pencils, so I'm going to do the pencil part first and then apply water afterwards. And I'm going to show you some techniques to do with how to create texture in this foreground area. Okay, so I've just got another thing that I'm experimenting with at the moment is this mixed media paper. You may have come across it before, but it says that you can use it for watercolour, acrylic, drawing, pastel, watercolour pencils. That's what it says. It's basically you can use it for everything. However, it doesn't always do what it says on the tin, as is said. Okay, so I'm going to test it and see if it's any good. Mainly for watercolour, because generally, you know, I've applied acrylic paint to this paper and it's fine. You know, it cockles a little bit, but it's totally fine to use for that. But watercolour is a different medium altogether, and it's a lot of water, and sometimes paper doesn't take it, so we're going to try it. I've got an A5 piece here and I've taped it down with this thin masking tape. So first, what should we do? Okay, so the theory with all watercolour pictures is that you work from the back forward, so work from the distance forward. So the sky would be first. Oh, by the way, I've just lightly drawn this out with a 2B pencil before I started. You can work straight with the watercolour pencils if you want, but you don't have to. So I'm just going to apply this blue tone, and all I'm going to do is shade in the areas. You can do one of two things. You can either leave white areas free for clouds, or you can just fill the whole lot in, and I'm going to do that on this side. I'll fill the whole lot in so I can show you the different ways of using the pencils, and then this side I'm going to leave a cloud form in white like that. Okay, and I'll show you how to use both of those forms later with the water. Now, if you've got anything like excuse me, a bit of purple or even a dark blue, you might want to put in some details like this. A little bit of darkness. It's particularly dark on the horizon there, and we've got a darker patch coming this side, so I'll just put in. You don't want too much detail because it is in the distance. Okay, so now we go to the water. Now the water is a different thing. It is a reflection of what's going on in the sky, and we have also a reflection coming off the land. So again, I'm just going to lightly colour the water area in, ignoring the waves at the moment, because the waves are actually over on the sand bit. So I'm just going to colour in the main water area, and I'm going to leave it quite light in the distance. It does sort of lighten off as it goes off into the distance on this picture. The other thing is to do sort of curved shapes with your pencil like this. That will help with the movement on the water. And you can always add more colour if you need to later. But curved, can you see how I'm curving that round? Just where the movement of the water is around the bay. And then for the reflection, you can just add a little bit of purple or darker blue and just bring in, again, working with those shapes. That's what will bring you movement in your water around that area here. And you can put in the suggestions of darks and lights in the water too. Maybe a couple of extra bits, remembering that those marks would get smaller the further they are in the distance, so just remember that. Okay, I'm not applying a great deal of colour here, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so sand. Now sand is notoriously difficult, especially if you haven't got a sandy colour. You need to undercoat it with, and don't forget this little area here going through the archway and the area. Let's have a see now. That would come down there. That comes right. So we've got a bit of a wall there. Okay. So undercoat with yellow. I'm going to go behind the uprights on the tops of the castle walls for now, into that lovely bay area there. Don't worry if it's a bit messy. So here comes the time when you put this shadow in. It's where the damp water is coming. Now you need to sort of paint around the wave forms with that shadow, and it is a sort of red purple tone, and it will integrate with, couldn't get that word out, with the cliff edge, and also come down a little bit down here. Okay, now I have got a white pencil, and I don't know whether it will work on top of this, but we can try. Okay, so you've put your waves in. Okay, it's not working too well, so it may be that I have to lift that yellow off there for that the wave area. Okay, now into an orange. Just again, you can work in that sort of curved shape. It does help when creating these sweeping areas of colour. Just a touch of orange, leave that quite light, and stronger as it gets towards the sea. Okay, there's none there. No, there's none there. Right. Okay, green. No, we'll go for brown next. So I've got a brown. It's a sort of red brown colour, and I'm going to put that where my cliffs are showing. I'm just going to colour it in to begin with, very lightly, like that, because it's actually quite dark in places. There are some details, and there is a sort of little rock formation coming out into the sea there. Now we might have to look at that a little bit more clearly once we've painted it in, because it's got some holes in it. But come along the edge, up into that really dark area there, with these lines. These are the rock formations where the rock has been worn away. And then you've got dark sort of lines coming down. Some details here, but not a great deal. Again, they're in the distance, so you don't want too much colour and too much information because you want it to recede into the distance. Okay, so again, just a loose application. You might want to add some purple into this distant land formation. I'm just going to put that purple all the way along the top line, because you would get blues and purples in the distance because that's the effect of haze on the land. Keep your pencils sharp so that you can get some edges in. You'll only get that with sharp pencils. And then up into this form here. And again, some close observation here of the structure of things. Get some nice, really dark purples in there. And then you can put some of the tree forms in the purple, because we've got some really dark areas in there. So, you know, the only way you're going to get them really dark is by applying layers of colour. There's another sort of sandy section just in there, so I'm just going to put some orange and yellow in there. And then you can start applying your greens. So start with the darker, well no actually start, and really you should start with yellow, just a touch of yellow in places, just to keep your colours vibrant. And you might want to lift areas anyway, just to give them an extra bit of zing. But this is a grassy plain round the back going over towards Bosherston. And then you've got little patches of colour coming down. And you know, I would more or less colour all of this in your green, even down to the landforms here at the back where the sand dunes are. Colour it all in. Really go very loose. And then you can apply darker tones once you've got that far. And you can sort of pick out details with your darker tones where there are lower trees than there are in the distance and so on. And it sort of goes darker in there. You can add more colour in after you've applied the water. So don't worry if you think, oh, I don't know whether I've applied enough here or not. And also another thing I do is, once I've done my coloured pencil version, because this at the moment is just like a coloured pencil version, I take a picture of it before I put the water on, and that's just so that I have a copy in case I prefer the coloured pencil version, which sometimes happens. So a bit more purple in these areas here. Okay, so now we're on to the wall structure. So with this, you can draw with your pencil and just make that as interesting as possible. I mean, you can follow rigidly what's there in front of you, or you can just sort of make it fairly random. You know, I'm sure none of us have that much time to put in every single stone in that wall perfectly. So just a suggestion of the wall is enough. And we've got a purple, the side of the wall coming down there, but we've got a highlight on the path there, which is why I'm leaving it that colour. This side of the gateway is very dark, so I'm going to use a lot of purple there. I'm using a lot of purple because I know that the stone is probably from the local area, and it does have, the local stone has a lot of sort of pinks and purples in it, so why not use purple or pink? It's up to you. And you know, how much of this beautiful shadow that you put in is up to you really as well, and how much detail you go into on your wall is up to you. But again, just make sure that you observe these lovely shadows coming through this archway. This is what will give you the drama in the picture. Okay, so it's really, really important. The light comes from your depiction of the shadows. And then it comes down, there's a path there. I'm going to colour most of this wall in purple. Just using a vertical mark, and leave the line at the bottom broken because we're going to put the grass in there, so it needs to be sort of broken. So don't put a straight line there. Vertical lines like that. Okay. And then I'm just going to lightly cover the path, but I'm going to add a little bit of red into it, and I'm using an alizarin, no, that is a cadmium actually, and that'll just send the purple a little bit pink in tone, which is what you need for these highlights. Okay, I would put little bits of this red around your wall, and just use a nervous hand and just sort of make some rough marks. Again over here, rough marks. Okay, I'm going to leave this free of colour for now. I am going to take a black, nice and sharp. Now, only apply a small amount of black. The reason being is because black tends to flatten your colours. So just be careful with it. Where the areas are really dark around here, a little bit of black will be valid. I'm just going to put some down on the bottom. Again, work with vertical lines just along that edge there. You can put in some like details in places on your wall. This is close enough to see little marks being made, so put them in. Shadows on those uprights where it's really dark here and here, like that, just for definition really, and to separate these really dark areas from the lighter tones. And these are lines of the steps. need to be defined, and we've got shadows coming through, but in a sort of step formation, so make sure you get those in like that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to start to apply colour now. For that you're going to need water and brushes. Use a variety of different sized brushes. I don't know whether I've got any. Oh yeah, I've got a few here. Round brushes I'm going to use. I've just got 3 different sizes here. Going down to a detail brush. That's just to get into very little areas, and because I'm only working A5 as well. Okay, so I'm going to start with the sky. Now if you remember, we had an area that we'd left white, and then we've got an area covered that I'm going to show you how to get clouds out of. So just a little bit of water on your brush, not a great deal, and then just start to apply the water. I've got a hair on my brush, and you'll see, you'll see that the colours will just start to blend into one another gently. Not too much. Well, actually this is behaving very nicely, this paper. So again, you can sort of, you don't have to apply. The thing that people do with watercolour pencils is that they apply water to absolutely every area. And sometimes it's just really nice just to leave some areas free of colour. And some areas free of water, so you get like a mixed media piece almost, like some of the pencil still showing through and others with the pencil absolutely blended. So it's up to you really, go with it. So in these areas where it's very white and you think, oh actually no, I don't want it that white, you can just sort of push the colour around into those areas and that will soften them up a bit. This area, apply the water. So I've got blue everywhere here, and I sort of think, oh, maybe I do want to have a cloud in there, maybe. So what do? You just do the same as you would do with a normal watercolour, which is you take a clean brush, clean damp brush, and you just lift. You can see that happening. But every mark you make, you must wash your brush off, dry it off a little, and then just lift. So you can see that happening there. Okay. So just fiddle around with it until you're happy. That's a bit harsh, that edge there. Okay, there you go. There's your sky. Now, what happens if you sort of think, oh, it's not blue enough, not whatever, then you can work on top of a damp piece of paper, but you just have to be quite gentle because the paper is vulnerable now. So just be gentle when you press, because otherwise you'll tear your paper. Okay, you can also work on top of it when it's dry. So if you'd rather wait until it's dry, then you can. So there you go, I've put some darker marks in there and I'm just pushing them around to lighten them up a bit like that. Okay, so there we go. That's how you get the marks darker. I'm going to put a little bit more over this side. Just remember, don't press too hard and you won't bother your paper then. You can wait for it to dry and then you can apply water. Okay, there we go. I will wait for that to dry and I'll show you how to add colour on top. So now, next thing to do logically would be the sea. So again, in with your water and just start to soften. Now you will find that if you touch those edges there, they will bleed into the paper. So just be careful if you don't want any kind of reflection. So use these sweeping brush marks, continue with those sweeping curves like that, and then you'll get shape. Smooth those areas in. I can see that the purple is quite strong, but the blue is quite weak. So this is what you'll find when you use your pen, because your pencils will behave differently to mine because they might be a different brand. So just be aware of that. They might move more efficiently, they might not. They might need a bit more pushing around to get moving. So just be aware. Now, the other thing you can do is take a wet brush, and slightly wet brush should I say, and then just pick up the paint on your brush like this. Okay, and then you can go in and paint in more depth of colour if you need it. So rather than working with the pencil on the paper, this is another method of applying that paint. If you find that you haven't got a colour that you need, then there's no reason why you couldn't apply your watercolour. So, you know, be flexible, and if you want more depth of colour where your shadow is, just put in the odd fleck here and there using your brush. No problem. And I'm going to leave that distant water fairly light because I want some contrast and I want some drama. So there. Okay. So keep adding paint until you're happy. Maybe I do want a bit more purple just underneath that edge there. See, as soon as you put that dark tone in, it starts to really come to life. I'm going to take bits of that up into, so I might as well now clean my brush and start to apply water to my sand. So again, start with the lighter tones and then draw that into it's quite fun this, and it does offer you the chance to be able to take your work out into the environment outside, because you don't need a great deal of materials. The pencils are really good for en plein air work. So we've got our shadow here. I'm going to apply a little bit more, I think, just here. You only need a small pot of water really, and a brush, and you're away. Okay, there we go. Next bit. I'm going to leave this to, well, no, maybe I can lift it off. So let's try and see if we can lift off some white. So I've got a smaller brush now, and I'm going to attempt to lift the waves off. So clean brush, squeeze it off so it's not too wet. There's one wave. How well will the yellow come off? Different colours lift better than others. The blue seems to have come off really nicely there. Oops. The yellow may not do the same thing, but let's have a look. You can also use a tissue in this area. It might be quicker. It is lifting, but you need to sort of go over it a few times, I think. You can see that that's lifting off now. Oops, just knocked the camera. Okay, So just keep going until you get back to the white paper, and this is actually behaving really nicely, this paper, so I think I will use it again. It's not breaking up on me underneath, which is great, because you will find, if you know about watercolour paper, that what happens is if you rub it a lot, it tends to come up on you. So just keep progressing with this colour, trying to lift. It is just a matter of going over and over and over until you've got it. It might be that I need to darken things up around it, because that's another way of lifting and making whites back again. Okay, right, okay, I'm quite happy with my sand. I've got a little bit of a bleed here where it's picked up from the castle wall, but never mind. Okay, next thing, distant hills like this. And do those before you do your green. And also do those once the sky is dry, so it doesn't bleed into the sky. And then you just literally work in from background to foreground with your water. And blending all these areas together. And again, like I said, you know, if you need to add more paint, you add more paint. If you feel like you don't need it, then leave it alone. But try and work the light colours first, or the lighter tones first. And make sure you drag things into one another so there's no hard edges. Work in swirly forms for the trees, like this. Swirl your brush around. Think of what you're painting. What sort of shapes are they? If you use mark making that replicates those shapes, then you're likely to get forms that look correct rather than forms that look a bit wooden. I'm really working into this darker colour now, so just be careful. I'm just going to come back up because I still haven't done this area here. And I'm just going to work in to that area first because it's lighter. When you work along the side here, work in a continuous line like this, so that you retain those marks that we made earlier on. And then you can come back in and start working those darks into one another, like this. And really, we're looking for an impression here. We're not looking for a total accurate representation. We're just looking for an impression of what we've got in front of us. And I quite like that, so that's good. Right, so into here. There we go. Right, next bit is this. Okay, so same process. Ideally before, dry this off first, okay, so it doesn't run. Start to apply, working in, and in this instance I would leave some of the lines behind because they are really lovely. The texture that we've created with our pencils there is really quite interesting. So I would choose to just randomly apply this water and then break it up as it goes. Your nervous hand, just sort of broken mark making, really loose. Drag some of it downwards into that grassy area that we're going to work into. Same here. Again, if it's not dark enough, you can always apply more paint after. Or you might actually like, you might like this as it is. It's quite an interesting little picture when it's quite loose. I think a lot of people tend to think they've got to do everything really beautifully, accurately, almost photorealistic, and that is not what we're after with art. We're always after an impression or a version that we can't see with a camera. So don't, make yourself feel bad about not having something that looks absolutely like the thing that you're painting. That's not what we're after. No point to that. We're looking for your impression of what you're seeing. Okay, now we can work into this after, but I want to show you the next technique, which is using shavings. So here I've got a tin which I've sharpened all my pencils into, and I'm removing the woody bits. Don't worry if you don't remove them all, but we're going to use the shavings. Okay, so you need some of those to begin with. Hopefully you've sharpened a few pencils and you've got plenty of those available. So here, now all we need to do is apply water to the area, and we're doing it here because it's in the foreground. Okay, you don't necessarily need to do it there. Now you may do, if you're working on a much larger painting, you might find that you do need more detail, more texture, because it's a larger surface. Okay, so in that instance it would be relevant to put texture up here, but for this it's not. And all you're doing is you're dropping your various shavings. Now I've got different colours here, and I'm just going to go with those different colours and see what happens. Just apply it right up to the wall. You don't want to have a gap where the wall is. And I've got quite a lot of blue because the blue pencil was the blunt pencil when I came to using these pencils, so there's quite a lot of blue in there, but I'm going to use it. Why not use it? Let's use it. See what an interesting texture comes out of it. And all that happens is, because that's wet, it will spread a little. I'm looking for my knife. Oh, there it is. So as it absorbs the water, the colour will spread. And, if you want specific colours, then just shave in, a little bit more green or whatever you need. And hopefully you've got enough water on there. Now, if you haven't got enough water, when it dries, all you have to do is apply another coat. Okay. And have some fun with it. Try not to get it on the rest of your work. I mean, cover it up if you feel like you're going to be a bit messy. So keep shaving until you're happy that it's been covered and that there's enough there to make an impression. I'm going to put some yellow in here because I want it to be bright as well. So I'm putting some yellow in. Hopefully it hasn't dried out on me enough to make a good impression. Okay. So all you do now is you leave this to dry. Don't use a hairdryer because obviously you'll blow everything off. So the next thing you'll see is the almost finished picture. Okay, so here is a piece neatly finished. This is completely dry. I brushed off some of the marks with a brush. Okay. However, I like some of the texture left by this pencil shaving, so I left some of them in place, and they look like flowers. spring meadow type texture. So, you know, don't necessarily remove everything. The next thing to think about is, if you look at your image, have you caught the drama of the picture? Now, this image is not very well printed on my printer because my printer is not great. So if it had been a better printer, I probably would have had more colour in this work. So I'm going to leave it more or less as it is. But if you want to, you can take things like your black, make sure it's sharp, and just add in some more detail. You know, if you've got normal coloured pencils, you could use those. If you want to add more detail just using paint, then you can. You know, it's, again, when you get images to a certain level, it is about, what do you like? Do you like it to be simpler, or do you like it to be more detailed? Do you need more shadow in the picture? Do you want more pattern in the picture? Do you need more shapes on these bricks? You know, do you need to put some more line work in? Do these areas need to be darker? You know, don't be frightened to add extra elements in, but just be careful not to ruin the image that you've created. You know, you can overwork pieces, as you all well know. Sometimes you sort of kick yourself that you've done a little bit more to something than you should have, and that generally is that need to have more detail. And the thing is, like I said, that's what we have cameras for. So, you know, try and train yourself not to finish everything perfectly, or what you think of as perfectly. You know, as artists, we have artistic license, and that gives us the opportunity to create images that are our own, not anybody else's. They will always remain yours if you make them your own. Put some lines in the sea, maybe. Okay, so just fiddle about with it until you're happy with what you've got. Make sure you keep details to a minimum as they go away from you. Okay, the only thing that I haven't managed to capture are the waves on this picture here. And probably what I would do, even though I've got a white pencil, it might stand out a bit better now. No, it doesn't really work. You can see that. Is just apply a little bit of gouache if I wanted those waves to come back in. Okay, have fun. If you want flowers here that are not just sort of blended very randomly, you can add some dots of yellow or dots of white to increase the flower interest. Okay, hope you enjoy it. Let me know how you get on, and see if you can find some of your own images to paint of this area, because it is so beautiful. Okay, bye for now. Enjoy.